Time to talk all things New York, because the Knicks find themselves in a very, very interesting, oh, there he is, situation. Stefan Bondy joining the show now. You know where we're going first, sir. We are going to the fact that they cannot, for the love of everything, buy a win against both Cleveland and Boston. Why?
Well, I mean, listen, against Boston, the problem has been defending the three-point line. And they certainly showed themselves, acquitted themselves a lot better in that last matchup. It came down to the wire. They should have won the game in regulation. They should have fouled Jason Tatum instead of letting him hit that tying three-pointer in the fourth quarter. So at least, they're showing improvement, at least against the Celtics. They were blown out by the Cavaliers. They were blown out by OKC. I think there's a talent gap. More than anything, there's certainly a gap in the level of depth. The Knicks don't have a very good bench. Tom Thibodeau doesn't trust his bench. So I think that's all part of it. But, I think that the Knicks are seeing, they're looking at that last matchup against the Celtics. They're looking at the possibility of a second-round matchup and saying, look, we can hang with those guys. I think that's their big takeaway from the other night. Oh,
okay. So that is the glass half full approach, which I appreciate, of course. But do you think, what is the vibe like? Do they feel like we are genuinely missing something, or because it doesn't look like they're going to hang with them?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jalen Brunson, I think, in my opinion, Jalen Brunson is the clutch player of the year. So if you keep the game close, they believe that they have the guy to put them over the top. The question is whether they can keep it close. They acquired OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges to deal with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They have not been able to hold those guys down. It has not been a good matchup for the Knicks. So they need to figure out a way to, especially Tatum, figure out a way to hold him down. They did switch after the first matchup. They had Mikal Bridges on him. They switched OG Anunoby on him. That produced better results. So I think they believe they have something going there in terms of slowing down Jason Tatum. And we don't know where Jaylen Brown's knee is. He's been resting. If Jaylen Brown is compromised in any way, then the Knicks, that's an advantage the Knicks can lean into.
Yeah, excuse me. And we're talking about matchups, and the Knicks, they're the 3 seed right now, currently, and with everything's going. Their possible first-round matchup would be the Detroit Pistons. Is there any concern there with that matchup, or do you think this is a team that feels comfortable going into the first round?
Well, I'm actually in Little Caesars Arena right now, and the plot twist is that the Knicks are suddenly resting their guys for this matchup tonight. Josh Hart isn't playing. OG Anunoby's not playing. Mitchell Robinson's not playing. If the Knicks had defeated the Pistons tonight, they will have basically secured a first-round matchup against the Pistons. If the Pistons win out, then all of a sudden the Knicks are looking at a potential matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks. So, I guess the message, if you're the Pistons, you're looking at like, oh, they don't want this smoke. They could beat us today and secure that first-round matchup against us, but they're resting their guys. So, they can say what they want, but
Detroit should rest everybody too. Let's just play some chess. Everybody just rest.
What if I told you 5 months ago that the Knicks will rest to play Giannis and Dame in the playoffs versus the Detroit Pistons? That's what you're saying?
We would have lost a lot of money.
Wow.
I mean, listen, I don't know. They are banged up. They played a ton of minutes, so it's not just playing to the matchup. I'm sure that they're resting their bodies to get ready for the playoffs, but they do have an opportunity tonight to essentially secure a first-round matchup against the Pistons, and they're resting some guys.
So the Knicks, let's say they get the Bucks. Obviously, I think I'd rather the Pistons if I'm the Knicks than the Bucks. I don't want Giannis and Dame. What, do you think that's a more favorable matchup for them, Milwaukee?
I'm with you. I wouldn't want to touch Giannis Antetokounmpo in the first round. To me, he's the best player in the Eastern Conference. I know people say Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell. To me, it's Giannis Antetokounmpo still. Okay. He's not somebody I want to see in the playoffs. We don't know what's going to happen with Dame Lillard in that first round, whether he's going to play. We know about Dame time and his ability to come through in the clutch. Me, personally, I'd rather go up against the Detroit Pistons. Yeah. With that being said, the Knicks in the regular season owned the Milwaukee Bucks. Brook Lopez, they tried to put Brook Lopez on Karl Anthony Towns. That was a disaster. So, if you're looking at regular season matchups, the Knicks own the Bucks.
Yeah, I love what JB's doing in Detroit, but I'll take that and experience that youth in the playoffs.
Because it's unknown.
I don't want Dame Lillard and Giannis, two of the best players in the world in the playoff series.
That's fair. That's fair. Is the season? We're going to get to is the season a failure? If they don't get past Boston in the conference semis, how are we looking at the season?
Yeah, I mean, when the season started, the idea was they lost twice in a row in the second round. So they spent all this draft capital. They depleted their assets in order to improve the roster to get Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. The expectation is they take this next step forward, and the next step forward is the conference finals. Unfortunately for them, Cleveland took this ginormous leap and became the top seed. So now the Knicks are staring at a potential second-round matchup against the Boston Celtics. And to me, and I think around the league, the Boston Celtics are the favorite to win the NBA title. Yeah. So, you know, I think that in order to show improvement, they'd have to have they obviously have to win the first round, and then they have to show that they can compete with the Boston Celtics in the second round, not get blown out, take 2 or 3 games maybe. I think that is showing that they're headed in the right direction.
Is there a world if they do get the Celtics second round and they get swept or lose 4-1 that Tibbs is out of there?
Coaches are losing their jobs left and right.
And there's a couple there's some good options. There's some good options out there to snag them while they're available, coaching-wise.
Well, I mean, listen, Tibbs totally. First of all, I'm not going to get in James Dolan's head. That would be impossible. I don't know what decision he's going to make, but Tibbs, to me, like, he totally turned this franchise around. I mean, if we were looking back before he got here, we're talking about perennial loser, laughingstock of the NBA. He totally changed the culture. I get it. Some fans say, well, he's the guy that took us there, but he's not the guy to take us, you know, to the next level, over the top. To me, you know, I think that Tom Thibodeau is the right guy for the job. I've always felt that way. And the idea that somebody else is going to put them over the top, I just don't see who that person is. If you're telling me Mike Malone, a New Yorker, you know, I respect what he did in Denver, but to me, Tom Thibodeau's a better coach.
So obviously this is Thibodeau's thing too, but Jalen Brunson comes back Sunday after missing 15 games, plays 34 minutes against the Suns, then 38 minutes against the Celtics. There's clearly no load management on him after missing that much time. Is this a problem? Is this a good thing? Is he trying to get his legs back as quick as possible going into the postseason?
Yeah, and I think it is important because when you looked at that first game he came back, he looked really rusty. He looked like he was not confident in his shot, in his ability to create offensively, especially in that first half. You saw things kind of change in the fourth quarter when he started to get to the free throw line, when he hit his first 3-point shot, that he started to find his rhythm. You know, he is not going to play back-to-backs, at least my understanding is. So they do play tonight, and then they play tomorrow at home against Cleveland. Oh. I don't think he'll play tomorrow against Cleveland. He has to get to that 65-game threshold in order to be qualified for All-NBA. I think he's going to make All-NBA. I think he's a top candidate for Clutch Player of the Year, so he wants to get to that 65-game threshold. And in order to do that, he has to play tonight and then the season finale against the Brooklyn Nets. So I don't expect him to play tomorrow, but we'll see.
Yeah, he's playing in those because those bonuses are big.
Yeah, that's
he doesn't have. By the way, he doesn't have bonuses.
Oh, he doesn't?
Contract.
Straight pride.
No bonuses.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's not eligible for that Supermax, so making All NBA doesn't really matter.
It changes a little bit.
No, he's doing it for the beauty of the game. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, so last month, God, it's only a month ago, there was that report you had about Mikal Bridges going to Tibbs, asking for fewer minutes for the starters, and then Tibbs was asked about it and was like, no, that never happened. What exactly was the story there?
Yeah, I mean, so Mikal Bridges straight blankly said, I talked to Tibbs about this, and I followed up and said, what was Tibbs's reaction? And he said, well, you know, he wasn't angry about it, but, you know, sometimes he's stuck in his ways. And then later because that was in the morning shoot around, later that day before the game in Portland, Tibbs said that meeting never happened. So it was pretty bizarre. You know, I don't want to get in Mikal's head just in terms of, you know, what underlying meanings he had. I do know that he is close with 2 guys on the bench, Cam Payne and Landry Shamet, from their time together in Phoenix. So it's entirely possible that this wasn't a critique on Tibbs. It was just him lobbying for his bench guys to get more playing time. But since then, you know, everything seems to be fine. And it hasn't been brought up again, to be honest.
I know. Didn't he have like the game winner that next game after all that? It was like kind of a perfect situation.
That same night.
Yeah, exactly.
That same night.
I know Josh Hart has called out sort of the minutes police out there. Everybody who's been watching knows that this is what Tibbs does. But I have to ask, I don't know that people pile on Tibbs for the sake of it. Is there not actual concern that last year the injury situation was a big problem and that they're afraid that that's going to happen again come these playoffs?
Well, I mean, they're not injured. They're actually as healthy as they have been all season. The other night, they were totally healthy. They had everybody, you know, available aside from the rookie Ariel Hukporti. So, you know, we can talk about a lot of the freak injuries that happened last season, Julius Randle tumbling over the guy in Miami and separating his shoulder. Jalen Brunson this season, landed on a Lakers player and sprained his ankle. Those things happen. But right now, the Knicks are as healthy as they've been all season. They're clearly kind of resting guys right now to get ready for the playoffs. And, I don't see a wear and tear situation right now. OG Anunoby, who everybody criticized for, not playing enough and being injured his whole career, he's already eclipsed the most minutes of his entire career. Josh Hart has already eclipsed the most minutes of his entire career, and they're playing their best ball right now. So I can't really look at it and say that this has been a detriment to them and towards the end of the season.
Thibs is such a fascinating person to me. Like, I've never been coached by Thibs, never spent any time around him. So can you tell me something that we may not know about Thibs, or something that would surprise people that don't spend a lot of time around him, like yourself? Tell me something that we'd be surprised about him.
Well, he does have a good humor. That's been surprising to people. But a lot of the stuff that you hear about him, it's true. The guy treats every game. The guy treats every game like it's a Super Bowl. And I think that's been a knock on him, and it's been a fair knock on him because he's this great regular season coach who squeezes the most talent out of his roster possible. But in the playoffs, his playoff record is not good. It's under 500. And in fact, the last 3 seasons, he's not the last 3 seasons, but his 3 playoff appearances with the Knicks, they've been eliminated by lower seeds. So I think that going into this playoff, that's the pressure on him, is to kind of take that reputation and invert it and actually make a run here. So, I think the problem is Boston. I don't know what you can do about Boston. They've been together for so long. They're just a machine. So is it fair to criticize Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks if they go into the second round and they lose to Boston in 6 games? To me, it's tough to do that.
Switching gears a little bit here, with Wemby out this season, obviously he was the runaway for Defensive Player of the Year. Now Draymond Green has kind of stepped into that favorite position. He's really pleading his case as well. You also agree with that he should win Defensive Player of the Year. What's his case? Because there's other guys like Mobley, there's some guards, there's Dyson Daniels, there's Dort, that guards really don't get the love, historically for this award. But you think it's Draymond Green gonna win it this year?
Oh no, I don't think it's Draymond. I don't know who. I don't have a vote this year. I would say Lou Dort, just because of watching him every night. Like, it's incredible. I mean, I don't watch all their games, but I do watch a bunch of the OKC games. I mean, his perimeter defense is incredible. That whole team's defense is incredible. I like Amen Thompson on Houston. That defense has been incredible. So, OG, I see the graphic up. OG to me is not Defensive Player of the Year, but I think, watching him night in, night out guard the best player on the opposing team, and I realize the Knicks defense is not rated that high. I think they're 13th right now. But to me, he's an all-defense, at least second team.
But if he had a podcast, he could have manifested.
And they just look into block shots and rebounds, so it's historically more bigs. Is that why? Because guards.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said because he was right about this. We were talking to OG about this, and there's not a lot of stats for what he does. There's no stats for somebody seeing him defending him, and that player picking up his dribble and said, "I want no part of OG Anunoby." There's no stat to say that. When a player sees OG Anunoby up against him, that he calls for a screen because he wants a switch. They don't have that stat. So people look at blocks, people look at steals, and that's why you see big men dominate this award.
We had Tony Allen come on. He said, the year Marc Gasol won, he said he was guarding Nazi Mohammed half the time. I was checking the best scoring wings in the league, and he wins it, not me.
So I covered Brook Lopez because I was covering the New Jersey Nets / Brooklyn Nets, but actually Michelle, actually the year after you left was the year I started covering the Nets, and I always viewed Brook Lopez as this terrible slow-footed defender, and then 2 years ago he's the runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year. I'm like, how is this even happening? This guy was just a hole on defense for so many years. And it's basically just because he's a big man standing under the basket and just blocking guys. That's all he does.
Yeah,
they gotta fix that. Figure it out.
I want to change course. Just recently, Carmelo Anthony was elected to the Basketball Hall of Fame first ballot, which was well-deserved and earned. And it opened up a can of worms about where does he rank amongst New York Knicks greats. What's your take on that? Where does he rank for you?
I mean, so I didn't get to watch all the true greats in the 70s. Those guys that won multiple championships, Clyde Frazier, Willis Reed, Bill Bradley, those guys. So I don't have a good read on how great they were. They obviously won the championship, so you got to put them on top. I grew up with Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing, to me, was the best Knick I've ever seen, and Carmelo Anthony was number 2. And Jalen Brunson is rising up the ranks.
Love that.
So number 2, greatest Knick of all time, in your opinion. He's said on record that he would love if the Knicks obviously retire his jersey. Is that, no, I know, but
of all time,
he obviously wants his jersey retired. I think his jersey should get retired. Does that ever happen at the Garden?
It happens for the winners, and those guys that I mentioned that won championships, including Dick Barnett, they had their jerseys retired. Patrick Ewing had his jersey retired. I think the argument against Carmelo Anthony right now is Bernard King did not have his jersey retired. And people view their careers in similar vein. They were great scorers who really didn't have much playoff success. So people, I guess the argument is until Bernard gets his jersey retired, Carmelo can't get his.
Yeah.
That is, yeah. And then you can't all of a sudden rush and do it, because then that looks really weird and obvious. The Kevin Durant stuff has already begun, and I think there's like a half dozen teams. It seems to be adding one each day about where he could possibly end up. I've heard a couple murmurs about possibly the Knicks. Is that something that you could see happening?
It all depends on what happens in the playoffs. Mikal Bridges, they traded 5 first-round picks to get him. If for whatever reason, they bomb in the playoffs and Mikal Bridges is up for a contract extension after this season and they decide that that's not the direction they want to go, then I could see, a movement towards a player like Kevin Durant. But, if they have an encouraging playoffs and they see this headed in the right direction, then they're going to stick with what they have now because they built this for the long haul. All these players that are the core of this team are in their mid to late 20s. So they're all in the same window. And if you incorporate somebody like Kevin Durant into that mix, now all of a sudden you're blowing up this window that you purposely made with this team. So, a lot of it will depend on the playoffs. But Kevin Durant is out there. I was talking to somebody the other night when Phoenix was at the Garden. They expect to have offers from multiple teams. So we'll see if the Knicks are one on.
It is, and this is my last one, because you did mention at the beginning about a talent gap between New York and Boston. And if they do end up getting out, even if it's respectable, there'll still be a talent gap, right? So are there any other names that perhaps maybe they'll target if it's not Kevin Durant?
I just mentioned the 5 first-round picks. They have no more assets. So they were kind of waiting for their big splash. They were waiting years for it, and they made it in the summer. And they got Karl Anthony Towns and they got Mikal Bridges. So the idea that, let's say, Giannis Antetokounmpo jars loose, they don't have enough assets to get somebody like that right now.
Got to make it work with what you have. Stefan, appreciate the time. Good luck the rest of the way. Hopefully they can extend this thing as long as possible.
Thank you, man.
Thank you so much.
Yep. We'll be right back.
Run it up, run it back.